At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Este episodio es presentado por Honda. Descubra la nueva Honda Passport Trail Sport todoterreno. La Passport más todoterreno que Honda haya imaginado jamás. Esta Passport cuenta con mayor altura al suelo, barras de techo en todas sus versiones y neumáticas especialmente diseñados para cualquier terreno. Además, disfruta todos tus viajes con el control de clima de 3 zonas, techo panorámico y opciones como asientos delanteros con calefacción y ventilación. Conoce más en honda.com/passport.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the British English Podcast, where I, Charlie, your host, give you a dash of culture and a dollop of language. Today, we're doing that by giving you a story, a classic story, one you may well know, but fear not. I've adapted it to include slightly more modern and advanced language. Regardless of whether you know the story or not, it's a great reminder of a tale that British children have been raised on for over a century. The author and illustrator, Beatrix Potter, wrote this classic called Peter Rabbit, or The Tale of Peter Rabbit, over 120 years ago in 1902. This calculation really made me double check that we're in 2025. We're a quarter of a century into the 21st century. I can't believe it. So, old Beatrix wrote this a long time ago, and the illustrations are iconic and timeless. And furthermore, the setting is quintessentially British. Think rural English garden, farm life, robins tweeting away, squirrels bouncing around, and foxes screaming bloody murder in the middle of the night. But yes, Peter Rabbit was inspired by the author's own experiences in the Lake District, which is a gorgeous place to walk around up north. I went there for a weekend fairly recently, and honestly, I don't recommend a weekend trip if you're coming from London. The traffic was a nightmare, as they say. The traffic was a nightmare. I'm not sure many people dream about bad traffic, but apparently a bad dream is traffic. That's a nightmare. I think we spent about 10 hours in the car on the Friday and on the Sunday. So, yeah, I say we did a weekend in the Lake District, but it was really a weekend in the car. So yeah, stupid idea, mainly because of the traffic. It should have been 5 hours, but still, you should go for at least a week to properly soak in the sights. And these sites are mountainous and lots of lakes as well, hence the Lake District. What else should I preface this story with? Well, the story teaches children about the consequences of disobedience and the importance of listening to authority figures, like Peter ignoring his mother's advice. Naughty Peter. And I'd say these moral tales are common in British children's literature. And then there's Peter's adventurous spirit and mischievous nature, which resonate with children in general, but it also reflects a cultural fondness for cheeky, lovable characters. And I'd say that's a trait that's definitely shared by British comedy and media. What else is there? What else is British? Tea gets mentioned. But you know what? Let's just enjoy the story and the advanced language I've sprinkled in there for you. So I give you The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter, adapted by yours truly, Charlie, from the British English Podcast. Here we go.
love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
The Tale of Peter Rabbit, adopted from the original by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, each with a personality as distinct as their names: Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a snug sandbank beneath the roots of a towering fir tree. The sort of idyllic home that would make a countryside postcard jealous. Though cosy, it was not without its challenges, particularly when it came to keeping Peter out of trouble. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one bright morning, adjusting her shawl as if bracing herself for the day ahead. "You may go into the fields or down the lane, but please, please stay out of Mr. McGregor's garden." Her voice dropped, taking on a grave tone. "Your father had an unfortunate encounter there. He ended up in a pie." The other rabbits gasped, but Peter looked only mildly interested, as though the threat of pie was an abstract concept. Mrs. Rabbit, sensing his indifference, narrowed her eyes. "Don't test me, Peter. Now run along and behave. I'm off to the baker's." With that, she left, her basket swinging, her thoughts likely filled with currant buns and brown bread. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, being the sort of well-behaved children who could be left unsupervised without catastrophe, hopped off to pick some blackberries. Peter, however, waited until the coast was clear before heading straight to Mr. McGregor's garden. After all, what was life without a bit of adventure? Peter slipped under the gate with ease, feeling a thrill of rebellion. The garden stretched out before him like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and he wasted no time. He devoured lettuces, gnawed on French beans, and nibbled parsley with enthusiasm of someone who hadn't eaten in weeks. But indulgence has its price, and soon Peter's stomach felt decidedly unwell. He was pondering the wisdom of his choices when he rounded a cucumber frame and came face to face with Mr. McGregor. The man froze, rake in hand, his expression one of pure, unfiltered outrage. Peter, on the other hand, felt his insides do a somersault. Not ideal, given his overstuffed stomach. "Stop, you thief!" bellowed Mr. McGregor, raising the rake like a knight preparing for battle. Peter didn't need a second invitation. He turned and bolted, his paws skidding on the soft earth. His plan, if it could be called that, was simple. Run fast and hope for the best. Unfortunately, hope is not a strategy, and Peter soon found himself hopelessly lost in the labyrinth of the garden. As he zigzagged through the rows of vegetables, Peter lost a shoe in the cabbages and the other in the potatoes. His jacket, a smart blue one with brass buttons, flapped behind him like a traitorous flag. Mr. McGregor was hot on his heels, wielding the rake with alarming enthusiasm. In his desperation, Peter dove into a gooseberry net, only to find himself entangled. The brass buttons on his jacket, which had seemed so stylish mere minutes ago, were now his downfall. He wriggled and squirmed, panic rising as Mr. McGregor loomed closer. Peter could hear the man muttering darkly about stew pots and Sunday roasts. 2 sparrows, drawn by the commotion, fluttered above Peter, chirping encouragement that was equal parts helpful and condescending. "Get out! Get out!" they cried, as if Peter hadn't already thought of that. With a final frantic twist, Peter tore free, leaving his jacket behind as a trophy for his pursuer. He darted under a nearby hedge, panting and trembling. His fur was a mess and his pride was in tatters, but he was alive. Never again, he whispered to himself. A lie he would forget the moment temptation struck again. Mr. McGregor, now more determined than ever, grabbed a sieve and searched for Peter. The rabbit, meanwhile, stumbled into a watering can. It was a brilliant hiding spot, he thought, until he realised it was half full of water. Sitting there, cold and damp, Peter began to question his life choices. Mr. McGregor's shadow loomed closer. Peter held his breath, every nerve on edge. Just as the man reached for a flower pot, Peter sneezed. Ka-choo! A noise that echoed like a cannon blast in the still garden. Mr. McGregor lunged, but Peter, fueled by sheer panic, leapt out of the watering can and sprinted toward the tool shed. He darted between pots, upturned a wheelbarrow and upset a sack of onions, all in a bid to escape. Somewhere, amidst the chaos, he knocked over a tin of seeds, scattering them like confetti at a wedding. For a moment, Peter thought he was cornered. But then he spotted a tiny window just large enough for a desperate rabbit. He squeezed through, his fur snagging on the sill, and tumbled onto the soft earth outside, scuttering away into the plants. Behind him, Mr. McGregor shook his fist, his curses drowned out by the creak of the shed door. Now thoroughly annoyed, Mr. McGregor went back to the blue jacket and hung it on a scarecrow, where it flapped in the breeze like a flag of Peter's defeat. Peter, meanwhile, crept cautiously through the garden, his ears swivelling at every sound. He passed a patch of radishes, their bright red tops taunting him, but his appetite had vanished entirely. At one point, Peter stumbled upon a pond, where a serene white cat sat staring intently at a group of goldfish. She didn't move, save for the occasional twitch of her tail, but there was a cold calculation in her gaze. Peter decided he'd rather not risk an introduction and scurried off. As he wandered, Peter encountered an old mouse scurrying back and forth, carrying peas in her mouth. "Excuse me," he said politely, though his voice trembled. "Can you tell me the way to the gate?" The mouse, unable to speak through her overstuffed cheeks, shook her head and disappeared into the undergrowth. Peter felt a lump rise in his throat. He was wet, cold, and thoroughly miserable. For the first time, he truly regretted not listening to his mother. He sat down by a patch of mint leaves and let out a sigh so heavy it seemed to rustle the plants around him. Just when Peter thought all hope was lost, he heard the faint sound of a hoe against the ground. He peered through the leaves and spotted Mr. McGregor, hunched over a row of onions, his back turned. Beyond him, glinting in the sunlight, was the gate. Freedom was so close he could almost taste it. Summoning every ounce of courage, Peter crept forward, moving as silently as he could manage. His paws barely made a sound on the soft soil, though his heart thudded loud enough to drown out everything else. When he reached the edge of the path, he hesitated, glancing back at Mr. McGregor, who was muttering to himself about weeds. And then, with a big gulp, Peter ran. He dashed along the path, weaving between the blackcurrant bushes, and slipped under the gate just as Mr. McGregor looked up. Peter didn't stop to see if he was being followed. He ran and ran, the cool air stinging his face, until he reached the safety of the big fir tree. Inside the burrow, Peter collapsed onto the sandy floor, a soggy, exhausted mess. His siblings looked up from their blackberry feast, startled by his dishevelled appearance. Mrs. Rabbit, returning from the baker's, took one look at him and sighed. "Ah, another jacket ruined. Honestly, Peter, what am I to do with you?" Peter hung his head as his mother handed him a cup of chamomile tea, her remedy for all ills. It was warm and soothing, though it did little to ease his bruised ego. Meanwhile, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, blissfully unaware of Peter's ordeal, enjoyed bread, milk, and blackberries for supper. Peter, sipping his tea, couldn't help but think that bread and milk sounded far better than chamomile and regret.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate pina colada and Thai-iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
All right, that was an adaptation of the classic The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter, adapted by me. I'd love to know the percentage of people listening to this who've heard this story before, because, you know, this is a worldwide children's story, but I just wonder how worldwide it is. So, in fact, I'm going to put a poll up on Spotify asking this question. Yes. So head over to Spotify and vote on that if you're not in that app. And if you're in that app, just, you know, scroll below and have a little look. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my reading of it. I think it's time to actually come clean and tell you the truth. I originally recorded this episode for a new show, a new podcast that I'm planning to create to help people fall asleep soundly. I struggle to sleep easily. I don't nod off easily. And I sometimes listen to these kind of podcasts that help you by reading a story nice and slowly. The idea was to record a collection of classic stories in a soothing tone, essentially. So if you did find yourself nodding off, then just know that was actually mission accomplished without you knowing. But yeah, I've parked that idea for now, that podcast idea. And since then, I felt compelled to share this one with you. I will probably come back to that idea in the near future, but not for now. So yes, thank you for listening to this episode. And I'm sure you know by now, but if you'd like to study the language that came up in this episode, you can check out the premium podcast to access the transcripts, glossary, and flashcards. If you're interested in leveling up your speaking and writing skills, you'll want to join the Academy. Each week, we focus on one particular episode using the video and audio lessons that I create to go over the vocabulary that came up. We also engage with quizzes, grammar and pronunciation lessons. Then we attend a midweek evening Q&A session where you can build more confidence in the language and the nuances surrounding it. After that, I invite members to submit a writing assignment that incorporates the target language. And on Saturdays, I host a live marking session to go over those assignments. And the nice thing about both of those weekly sessions is that if you can't make it to the live event, you can watch the replay immediately after to catch up. So head to thebritishenglishpodcast.com if you like the sound of the Premium Podcast or Academy. But if you were here just for the public episode, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. My name is Charlie, your host, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the British English Podcast. Bye-bye.